Hi there and welcome to CodeFramer. So in the last video we understood about builder design pattern, where we saw that how we can basically create a builder class using which we can build any complex object, and we also saw that how we can create different methods inside our builder class using which we can later provide all the attributes related to the complex object that we are trying to create. And also in the last example we saw that how we can basically write a builder pattern using its 4 components, which was the builder component, concrete builder component, director component, and finally the product component. So I hope that you got a good understanding about the builder design pattern. Now it is time to understand about builder facets. Now as I said in the last video that sometimes your object can be very complex to directly use a particular class constructor method and just create an object, because the object may have a lot of parameters and also it may have lot of nested objects which it may require in order to create an object of the particular class. So in such cases we use the builder design pattern. Now sometimes your object is so complex that a single builder will not be enough to create that complex object. You may need multiple builders in order to create a particular complex objects, and that's where the builder facets design pattern comes in. So using the builder facets you can create multiple builders, and with those multiple builders you can create your complex object. So in this video we will see an example where we will try to create an employee object using builder facets. Now when it comes to an employee record in a particular company, you could imagine that the company would like to store different kind of data about the employee, right? So say for example the general information about employee will be required. Similarly the address of the employee will be required. Similarly the employment details about the employee will be required. Now when it comes to employment details, you have employment number, you have position of the employee, you have annual income of the employee, you have the employment type or employee type. So there are so many different informations that you can store as part of employment details. So when it comes to an employee object, you could imagine that storing such an object can be very complex in nature. So in our example, we will try to create an employee object, but in order to just keep the example as simple as possible, we will use 2 information about the employee which we would want to store. So basically we will store the address of the employee and also we will store the employment details of the employee. So these are the 2 information that we will store in our employee object in this example. Now when it comes to storing the address and also the employment details of an employee, you could imagine that address has different fields, right? Like for example the street, the postcode, and also the city. So these are the different fields which you can store in the address. And also in the employment details, as I said, that you have multiple fields. So instead of storing all these fields inside your employee object, what we can do is we can create separate builders for address and employment details. So which means that in order to store the address information of a particular employee, we will create a separate builder, and similarly in order to store all the employment details of the employee, we will create a separate builder. So these are the 2 builders that we will create in order to store the address information and also the employment details of a particular employee. And this is where builder facets helps us. So using the builder facet design pattern, you can create multiple builders using which you can store different information about a particular object that you want to create. So always remember that when it comes to builder facets, it allows you to create multiple builders, and using those multiple builders, you can create your complex object. So having understood this, now let us go to the editor and start coding. So as I said that we are going to create an employee object where we will store information about the employee's address and also the employment details of that particular employee. So in order to do that, let us first create an employee class where we can basically declare the kind of information that we want to store about the employee, right? So we can write class employee and then we can declare its constructor. So we can write def in it, and then let us store the information about address of the employee. So we can write self.street is equal to none. So initially we will just declare none for all these instance variables that we are going to create for the employee. So we can write self.street is equal to none, and then we can write self.postcode is equal to none, and then we can write self.city. So this will also be equal to none. And then we can store the information about the employment details of the employee. So we can write self.employment number, which will be none. Then we can have the self.position, which will be equal to none. Then we can have self.annual income, which will also be equal to none. Now these are the 2 sets of information that we would want to store for this particular employee object. Now again, you can store many more details, right? You can store the name, you can store the emergency contact of this employee, you can store the phone number, the email address. So let us not go into the details of this particular example. Let us just stick to understanding what is design facets, right? So when it comes to this particular class, we will just store the address of this employee and also the employment details of this employee. Now, as always, we can write a specification method using which later we can simply view what are the different details we have been able to store for a particular employee object. So we can write def specification and then we can return an f string where we can basically mention address, where we can give self.street, then self.postcode, then self.city. And in the next line, we can give one space here so that in both the sentences we have a space between them. So here also we can return an f string, which is nothing but the same sentence basically. So we can write employment details and we can simply write all the instance variables, which is self.employment number, then we can write self.position, and finally we can just write self.annual income. So this will be the output of an employee object. So using this particular method, we will be able to see whether all the information got properly stored into our employee object or not. So now let us build the builder class for the employee. Now what I'm trying to say is, using this particular builder class that we are going to create for this particular employee, we will be able to use the other builders. Now by other builders, what I'm trying to say is the builders that we have created for storing the address information, and also we are going to create other builder for storing all the employment details, right? So we are going to create those two builders separately in order to store our address and also employment details. Now to use those builders, in order to store the information about address and the employment details, we will create a particular builder for this employee, and from that builder we will be able to access the other builders that we have created in order to store the data for this employee. So don't worry if it is not making sense, just bear with me for some more moments because we will code everything and see how it works. So let us first create a builder for this employee. So we can write class and then we can write employee builder, and now we can declare its init method. So we can write init self, and here we will write employee, which means that this particular employee builder will take the employee objects as its input argument. And if you have not passed the employee object, then we can simply create a new employee object, and then here we can write self.employee equals to employee, which we have received as an input to this particular init method. And now we can simply declare our build method, and here we will simply return the employee object. Okay, so these are the two methods that we have created for our employee inside our employee builder class, but later we will also be creating the other methods that are required to basically access the other builders that we are going to create. But before writing those methods, let us first go and create those other builders that I'm talking about, right? So first thing, you will have to create the builder for the address. So we can write class address builder, and this will inherit employee builder. So now inside this class, we can declare our constructor method. So we can write def init, and this will take the employee object as the input. And now in order for you to have the access of this self.employee instance variable in your parent class, what you can do is you can call super, and then you can simply call the constructor method of your parent class by passing the employee object which you have received in this particular constructor method. So this will be the constructor method for your address builder. Now you can define all those set methods, right? Because you have to set different values to your address information of the employee, right? So you have information like street, postcode, and city. So you can create a separate method for all these information. So you can write def set street, and which will take street as the input parameter. And then you can write self.employee dot street, which will be equal to street, and also then you can return self here. So I hope that you remember from the last video why we are returning self here. This is to basically chain all the methods. Later when we will be creating an object using this particular address builder, we can basically chain all this method together in order to provide all the values for the employee object about the address information. So now let us go on to write our next method, which will be set postcode, and this will again take the postcode as the input, and then we can write self.employee.postcode, which will be equal to postcode, and then we can simply return self. And the last method will be set city, which will again take the city name as the input, and then we can write self.employee.city, that will be equal to city, and finally we can return self. So this will be our address builder. Now we need to create the next builder in order to store our employment information, right? So we can write class employment builder, which will also inherit the employee builder, and now we can declare our init method where we can take employee object as the input, and then we can call our parent init method, and again we can pass the employee object to that parent init method so that we get access to this self.employee instance variable. So I hope that that is clear. Now we can again write all the set methods for setting the employment information for the employee object. So we can write def set employment number, and let's say we give input as number for this method, and then we can write self.employee.employment number equals to number, and then we can return self. Then let us write the method for position of the employee. So we can write set position, and then here we can take position as the input, and then we can write self.employee.position, which will be equal to the position that we have received as an input to this method, and then we can return self here. And then let us write the final method, which is set annual income, and here again let us take income as the input parameter, and then we can write self.employee.annual income, which will be equal to the income that we have received in this method, and then we can return self. So these are the different methods that we have written in our address builder and also the employment builder. So using these two builders, we need to create the employee object, right? Now the builder for this particular employee is the employee builder class. So which means that we need to somehow write a method inside our employee builder which can use these two builders which are specifically created to store the information about the address and the employment. So inside this employee builder class, we can create two methods which will basically access these two builders that we have created for address and also employment details. So we can use the decorator property, and now let us write our method. So we can name this method as address info, and inside this method we can simply return the address builder, and we can pass the employee object that we have created in this particular employee builder, right? So we have stored our employee object inside this self.employee instance variable, so we can write self.employee here, because remember that your address builder takes the employee object as the input, right? So you need to pass the employee object to the address builder. So this is the address info method that you have created inside your employee builder, using which you are able to access the address builder, which is a specific builder created to store the address information, and you are passing the employee object for which you want to store the address information. And now let us create another method with property decorator, and we can write employment info, and inside this method we can simply return our employment builder by passing the employee object to that particular builder, which means that now we have access to these two builders that we have created specifically to store the address and the employment details of the employee object inside our employee builder. And this is exactly what builder facets are used for. Whenever you are creating a complex object which wants certain nested objects to be created, in such cases you can use the builder facets in order to create separate builders for those other nested objects, and you can basically get access of those separate builders inside the builder class of your main object, and then basically you can construct the object. So after having written all this code, let us see how we can basically use all of this to create our employee object. So in order to create the object of the employee, I can first call the employee builder class, right? So I can write EB, which is nothing but employee builder, and then I can say equals employee builder. So we can call this particular employee builder class, and now let us create our employee object. So we can write employee equals, and now let me use the multi-line way of writing these chained methods so that it becomes absolutely clear how we are basically constructing the employee object using different multiple builders. So first let me write EB, and inside this remember that we have the employment info and also the address info method, right? So first let us call the address info method. So just to keep the code a little readable, I'll just try to use some multi-lines here. So this is the method that we have called. Now using this method, we can access the address builder. So if you remember that in our address info method, we are basically returning the address builder, right? Where we have passed the employee object. So now we have access to the address builder that we have created. So which means that now we can use different methods that we have created inside our address builder. So what are the different methods that we have created? They are set street, set postcode, and set city. So let us first access set street. Okay, so inside the set street we can give the street name. So let us say it is a clean street where this particular employee lives. Then we can give the next method, which is set postcode, and let us just give some dummy postcode here. And then we can give the next method, which is set city, and let us just say that this employee lives in a really nice city where you don't have any power cuts. Anyways, jokes apart. And then we can access the second method that we have in order to store our employment information, right? So we had created a particular method to call that employment builder class, if you remember, right? Here we have created this specific method, employment info, using which we can basically access our employment builder methods, right? So here we can write dot employment info, and then we can have the access of all these methods inside this particular employment builder class, right? So we can write set employment number, and we can pass some employment number. So let us say this employee has 1111 as the employment number, and then we can give the next method, which is set position. Let's say that this particular employee is an engineer, and then we can give the annual income of this particular employee, and let us say this is around 500,000. Okay, so these are the information that we want to pass inside our employee object in order to create this employee object, right? And we have basically used two builders in order to construct our employee object, right? So now let us see whether all these information got stored successfully into the employee object or not, and also whether this employee object got created or not. So we can simply write print, and now if you remember, we have created a separate method inside our employee class in order to see the information about the employee object, right? If you remember, here we have created the specification method. So we can simply access the specification method here in order to see the information about this particular employee object. And one thing that I completely forgot here is to call the build method as well. And here we have to mention this multi-line, because remember that inside your employee builder, you need to call the build method as well, which basically returns you the employee object. So you need to call this build method as well. So now if you execute this code, then as you can see that our employee object has been created, and also all the details that we mentioned in order to create this particular employee object are also visible in the output. So as you can see here that the address is clean street with a postcode, and also the information about the city, which is the nice city, and also the employment details are given, which is the employment number, the position of the employee, and also the annual income of the employee. So I hope that now you are able to understand that you can basically create multiple builders in order to create or construct a particular object, which means that if your employee object has certain information that are extremely complex in nature, so in that case what you can do, you can just segregate those information and create separate builders for those informations, and using those builders you can construct or store those informations inside your employee object. So I hope that now it is clear how you can use builder facets to basically create multiple builders in order to construct a complex object. As I said that certain objects will need certain nested objects and wide variety of informations. So in such cases, you can segregate your builders according to the kind of information that you want to store, and you can use all those builders together inside your main class builder, which in this case was our employee builder, and then you can basically construct your final object. So I hope that you understood about builder facets well. In the next video, we will understand about builder inheritance. If you have any doubts or any queries related to builder facets, then do post in the comment section. I will definitely respond to you. And also if you have any questions related to any other concept which I have taken till now, you can definitely post those questions. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and also you were able to get a lot of value out of this video. So as I said, in the next video, we will understand about builder inheritance, and that will be the last concept when it comes to understanding builder design patterns. So having said that, if you like this video, then hit that like button, share it with other code lovers, and also subscribe to CodeFramer for more videos in the future. Thank you, and see you next time.